Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond BMR. I'm your host, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Hope you're all having a great, hot evening. Much like I am here in the state of Michigan, 91 degrees at kickoff, so to speak. Joining me tonight, back by popular demand, Jason McLean for Jason McLean Questions Everything. You can find Jason on YouTube. He'll be joining me along with a special guest who I've never met. I don't know who this person is, what they're all about. We'll find out in about 3 minutes. Beyond BMR goes beyond the mysteries of the world. We take you down a deep dive into all the realms that the rabbit hole produces for us, from Bigfoot to Dogman, UFOs to aliens, from time travel to the paranormal. How do all these phenomena come together? How do they relate? If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. You can find us on Subspace Radio, iHeartRadio, StreamYard, and KPNL Radio. Thank you to the lovely Selene out in Oregon for that one. The Super Chat's open for those of you that care to donate to the channel. It's a great way to help support what we do around here. And again, Jason McLean tonight, and Paco. That's right, Paco will be joining us. Before I get started with that tonight, everybody, as always, Mondays is Texas Front Porch. You can find Tex at 9 o'clock along with Brandy. 9 o'clock in the East on Mondays. Tuesdays, Van Buren Variety. You can find Bobby 8 in the East. 9 o'clock in the East. Tuesday nights, this is right now, Beyond BMR. Jason McLean does something on Untold Radio AM. I didn't write that down because I normally do. We can find him. He'll be going there a little after this show. So thanks to Jason once again for taking a little time tonight. Wednesdays is, yes, again, by popular demand, Jason McLean is now live. Jason McLean Questions Everything. He took about a 2-month hiatus from the live shows. You can find Jason and Donnie Cho, 8 o'clock in the East on Wednesdays. Thursdays is Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Me and Krista, 1 o'clock in East on Thursday. Thursday nights is the Blondes, the Booze, the Paranormal Podcast with Brandy and Krista. You can check them out at 9 Thursdays. Also, if you need a little more woo with the booze, you can find the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast Fridays, 9 o'clock in the East. And don't forget, Tex and Danielle Diva. If you're into true crime, Infamous Minds, that's on at 3 in the East. And I always have to make mention of my lovely friend Jessica Jones on Space Star Radio, 10 o'clock in the East, Saturday and Sunday. Of course, she is the Cryptid Huntress. You can find her on YouTube. And you know what? I love it when I'm not fully prepared, as always. My new book, been out for a month. Bigfoot Michigan Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1, and my guest, the Mr. Jason McLean. He's the artist behind the fabulous artwork on the front and back. He did some light editing and some other things, helped me format it, get it together. So once again, always thanks to Jason. And if you click on the Amazon link, which I don't have in the chat right now, you can also go over to Jason's name, because Jason's name is shared with mine on the credits of the book on Amazon. And it also takes you to all of Jason's titles and books that he's written. So I thought that was cool. I didn't know that they did that. And so that's a pretty cool thing. Thanks for everybody for popping on in. So typically this is where I bring up Tex and we BS about the weather. Well, Tex is working overtime. So it's me flying with by myself. I'm bringing up, of course, my two guests. And I always have to bitch about the weather. And right now I have my internet, good old BMR. When it's hot, I lose internet. When it's cold, I lose the internet. When the wind blows, I lose the internet. I finally had the internet up. It's rolling solid for the last 2 hours. We'll see how it holds up for me here tonight. So with that being said, I'm going to bring up Mr. Jason. Hello, Jason. Good to see you,
Rob. Yeah, I feel bad because you go through the whole lineup of all the different shows and all the different channels. I'm just like, hey, don't forget our friends, and I have the links down in the description below, and I move on with my life. So I feel bad now because you're over here like, yeah, go see these people. They're great.
Well,
They're
yeah,
awesome. I'm like, hey, you know them. You love them down there.
Well, Jason, that's okay because we all have different styles. And Jason, I get it. And it's okay. Everybody does things how they do it. And you do it your way and text it. Hell, text don't even mention the shows half the time I've noticed of late.
That's true.
Of course, well, again, if Brandy's listening, I have to take that back. Brandy does all that work for text because if it was up to text, it wouldn't get done either. But no, Jason, you do a
so
fantastic
many jokes
job
right there right now.
There are, and you guys were down in Texas. You guys did a great show yesterday. We're not really going to get into that, but what I did want to do is got to bring up this mystery guest. I have no clue who this guy is, and I'm going to introduce.
Keep it that way.
With that being said, why don't you introduce your friend, this guy, whoever he is? I don't know if he works at the local Walmart. I don't know if he's a professional or just some dude you met at the conference.
No. Here's what I can say about him. International man of mystery. He does not work at a Walmart. He knows where bodies are buried. He may have put them there to begin with. The CIA has numerous files on them that they've opened and closed because he told them. If he was any more dangerous, he wouldn't be allowed in the nation. I remember once we were running an op out of Tibet. I can't really talk too much about it. And what I saw this man do to a yak with his bare hands to save our lives. We got caught in a snowstorm. I thought we were going to die, and it was terrifying and frightening. It saved our lives. It was a necessity, but that's what he's about. He's about necessity, doing what's right when the time calls for it. That's what he is. That's what he does.
Well, now I can't wait to bring this guy up, but at the same time, Jason, I don't want to get flagged from our lovely people over at YouTube.
Yeah.
But with that being said, enough. That was great. I like that, Jason. Always entertaining as usual. So I'm gonna bring up your buddy, and here we go.
His name's Paco.
To be fair, that yak had it coming.
No, the yak absolutely had it coming. We can't talk about Nicaragua, but we can. I'm just saying the yak had it coming.
Got the swarm though.
I do like the subtitle, "The Other White Meat."
There you go. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We can USDA stamp of approval, I'm sure, with all packages that are distributed throughout our fine country.
There you go.
Yes.
Me and Jason were talking earlier today, and we came upon the horrible realization that we've now known each other for more than a quarter century. And it's not good. Not good.
It's not good. It's not good. Yeah. So keep it under control, or I'll tell the horse story.
You did say horror, right?
I said horse.
Oh, okay.
I get those
talk about
stories
the horse
too.
story.
But,
And here's the thing about that, Rob. The horse story he refers to, unlike the yak, legitimately happened. That's why he's bringing it up.
Well, we might have to get into that because most of the people that tune into this show, they love hearing good stories, and most everybody is familiar with Jason. In fact, they all are. And so I think we can get on with that. But let me ask you, speaking of stories, Jason, you were down at the conference, Dogman Conference. You text the whole porch crew.
Yeah.
Donnie's show, I see in the chat. Donnie was there, Brandy, Krista, Van Buren, Robert, Danielle.
Randy made an appearance. So speaking of stories, you were there for like what, 3 days? I know it was a 3-day event. Were you there for 2 days or 3 days? So there was a dinner the first night, and then it was 2 full days the rest. So I was there all day, Saturday and Sunday, and I showed up after the dinner on Friday, largely because I had to pick up Donnie from 2 different airports. We'll leave that there. But we did make it eventually, and it was a lot of fun. Got a chance to meet a lot of people. A lot of our listeners were there. It was great. Met a lot of great people. By the way, Selene is no longer in Oregon. She's here in Texas.
Oh, well, I gotta rewrite that for next week when I open up. So I did not know that. And of course, I wasn't there because I had things going on, as you well know, and I've spoken on that for ad nauseum, so we won't get into that. But yeah, so
I will never forgive you.
I have, yeah, I know you won't. And I've been getting it all month from everybody, but it was all good, and good, clean fun, of course.
If it makes you feel any better, I don't know you well enough to care one way or the other. So,
well, I'm glad you don't care. Thank you so much for that. Too many people care about me these days, and I'd rather have enemies these days. But so, Jason, 3 days.
Yeah.
We like to tell a few stories on this show, depending who the guest is, and you're a good storyteller as an author yourself. Anything interesting that you talked with anybody about? You don't have to bring up their name, or you don't have to bring up an anonymity, since it is in the spirit of the Dogman Conference. You come across any interesting Dogman tales that you care to share that you can remember?
Well, unfortunately, the best Dogman story I really can't talk about at all. However, we'll see how that goes.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry. That's just, it is what it is.
That's sweet. I know. Right.
Can I ask a question? Was that the one I heard earlier?
No, it's not.
I understand.
Yeah. I think so. One of the highlights is I have been I've now been named Pterosaur Texas Jason. But but a lot of it was just meeting people, speaking with people, hanging out, having a good time. I'm trying to think about which stories I can tell. One story that I don't think got enough play.
Okay.
Last night we were so Tex, in his infinite wisdom, decides to take us to the stockyards Friday night. And for those who don't know, that's a bad idea for a number of reasons. And while we were I mean, there was fun and hijinks at the bar, meaning we couldn't actually get in physically because people were just literally packed in. There was some craziness with people in weird outfits. Now that's as far as I'll go. I'll keep it family friendly. But what we did see that I think was the highlight of the evening was there's an art gallery down there. It is a great art gallery. Lots of fun stuff in there. A couple of years ago, I got a chance to stop in and talk to the guy who does all the framework for him. Amazing gallery. They had in their front paintings of cowboys and dinosaurs, and it is and I loved it. I couldn't tell you how much fun it was.
That's the one actually in the shop, or in the shopping market, right?
Yeah. It's it's right there before it, it stops being the stockyards and becomes just like the rest of Fort Worth. Yeah. Adobe, I believe, is what it's called, the Adobe Gallery. Great. I mean, seriously, guys, if you ever get there, just you got to be there when it's live. But it's massive. The artwork's amazing, but they've got some really, really great classical work, some interesting pieces, and they're just a lot of fun. So yeah, for me, the highlight was the cowboy dinosaur art. You had them wrestling with some oviraptors, hurting dinosaurs.
Which loosely ties into today.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, perhaps it does, because there are some people in chat here that I'm looking right. Thanks everybody for coming on in. We haven't heard about your pterosaur experience you had, Jason. I know you've said it ad nauseum, but I forgot it anyway.
It's true. It's true. So yeah, let's hop in the Wayback Machine.
Yes,
right?
Of course. Taking us way back to 1986.
Where you still 92. Look like you were 45.
Hey, I looked like I was 37 in 1992.
No, you didn't.
And so again, long story short, I'd been fishing in the morning. It was June-ish. And we'd been fishing this creek that's near the house, 10 Mile Creek. It's a creek that runs 10 miles. Texans are great at a lot of things. Creatively naming things is not one of them. And
nor having it filled.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so this creek is like 15 feet down in the and cuts into the limestone rock that all of North Texas sits on. In fact, Donnie took a couple videos of all this, so y'all can actually see it when he comes out with that episode. And so my friend had just packed up, and because it was about 11ish, 10:30, 11, he was getting ready to go back for lunch. I'm following him. I get just inside the tree line. He had left a little bit further. I wanted to get a few more casts in. As I get into the tree line, because you have to remember these creeks are lined with trees because of the annual flooding. We leave basically everything alone for at least a few yards because there's just no point, right? So this is where all the trees are. You really can't see into these creeks. Paco can definitely account for what I call the green wall, right? We mow right up to that tree line, and then you have these shrubs. You just cannot see into these things, so you can kind of get in.
Really quickly, the green wall, that's the surrounding area of the suburb of Austin, Texas, and Dallas, Fort Worth area, the green wall, or no?
Well, what I call the green wall is essentially that it's definitely here in Texas, but I think most of y'all probably have it.
Yeah.
It's that first few feet of that tree line in surrounding suburban areas where you're mowing up to these lines, and so that's where these tall grass and shrubs will grow up. You can't see into the tree line because there's not enough. The trees don't block enough light to prevent anything from growing. So you have these taller trees, and you've got these tall shrubs that no one's going to bother to cut down because that's the wild area. So you really can't see into these creeks at all. You can march whole armies into them. No one would see them unless you happen to be in the creek. So I'm coming up out of the creek, and I just step inside the tree line, and I hear this noise I've never heard before. Again, grew up in the creek, grew up outside. It's the 80s. We weren't allowed to come inside. And, I poke my head out, and I see what I think is, at first, the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. Same color, kind of overall shape. You know how they fly with their legs sticking out from behind them sometimes, and they'll do that thing where they do this weird S curve with their neck, right? So it's like their head is sitting on their shoulders. So that's what I think I'm looking at. And again, I'm elevating because I've gone up the sort of collapsed rock wall. And it isn't until it's right in front of my face that I realize this thing has no feathers. Its right wingtip is maybe 5 feet from my face. And I watch it, fly by, and I realized what I thought had been its legs sticking out from behind it was a tail with a flange on the end, sort of a roundish, diamondish shaped tail. And I watch it just fly by, and it banks and disappears because I was sort of in a straightaway, like literally midway through the straightaway, and it just disappears, and that's it. And I spent the next essentially 20-ish years not even believing my own story because I couldn't believe that something like that could exist in a suburb of Dallas, Texas.
Yeah,
right.
It's very city. Even in our suburbs, it's still very city. So you don't get a natural feel for nature over there. The other thing that I'll say is, as long as I've known Jason, this story has never changed. And I think that's key in hearing stories such as this. Is do you start hearing other particular sources or other particular renditions when he starts telling it, but it's always been the same story, and it's one of the things that leads me to believe him more than not believe him, for sure.
And being that you're friends, you certainly didn't believe him the first time you heard him tell the tale.
No, I absolutely thought he was going through a traumatic trouble that he just didn't want to talk about. So I threw a lot of theories on that I will not repeat here because you're trying to not get booted. But and rightfully so. But he knows, I know that there are certain things that he has witnessed, that we have witnessed, and that it's a head scratcher. There are a lot of times where I will sit there and say that, and I can't say a lot of times. I think it's only been about 3 combined with us. But there have been times where I'm just like, look, I don't know what it is, but I sure as heck know what it's not, and that confuses me because I don't know what not it is. So it's it's very much kind of in that realm. And like I said, it's good to see that there's no fluidity to the story. When you're telling something like this, there shouldn't be.
And I agree. And I was kidding earlier. I've heard Jason tell the story a handful of times. I've known Jason probably 3 years now. Geez, for at least probably because I've been on Texas Front Porch almost 3 years. I've met Jason twice already in various locations in the United States, well, namely Alabama and Texas. But yeah, I've heard, and much like other stories I've heard from people, and I can even speak, even when I tell my Bigfoot encounter story, it never wavers. It's always the same because I didn't make it up. So it's very easy to tell the story fluidly without pause. Trying to think what to say. It just comes out of my mouth, much like what Jason just did, much just like what Tex did when he talked. Now Tex stutters anyways, but when Tex tells his story, though, it's always the same, right? So yeah, that's what I love about it, and so yeah, I mean and you can really get to tell the true meaning of somebody from their inflection in their voice, the way they look, and we're not here on this show anyway to, firstly, say call someone out, because I always have the motto, I believe in your story if you want to come on and tell it, and because we never walk in people's shoes. Which brings me back to a question, Jason, because I don't know if you heard this. This is literally 3 weeks ago. And that usually in the morning, I'll take a walk by the creek by my house. And it's on either side of the creek, there's a wood line. There's a nice a creek. There's some fish in it. But it's very spooky parts of the creek. But you don't see a lot of wildlife. You might see some fish and some birds. So I was walking over a bridge. And of course, I did not have my phone on me or a camera. But then again, that's always what happens, right?
Yeah.
Never. So I happen to be looking over this bridge overpass, and I see what appears to be this bird. Now the creek's width is maybe 10 to 12 foot wide at certain points, but it's down, and I was up on a bridge, so it's down maybe another 8-10 feet. But I've got to tell you, Jason, this bird, I'm going to call it a bird, it had a wingspan that literally encompassed, it went from almost from side to side, and it was just not even flapping its wings. It was just kind of up and down gliding, and I could see very long legs, and I saw from the rear end, from behind. I know it's a bird, and it's about a foot above the water, like it was looking to grab a fish, and it was very quick and deliberate, but it was brown, and like you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned the story about a blue heron. And we don't have those turkey buzzards or those turkey vultures around here. And for the life of me, I thought the first thing I thought was that ain't no pterodactyl. Because I think there was feathers, to be honest with you. But it was such a quick sighting, like Paco mentioned, in the suburbs. Because it's a horseshoe wildlife area, but we are in the suburbs. We're in the city. And I just thought and looked, wow, what is that? So I thought about you, but I know it couldn't have been that. Have you heard of such a sizable bird outside of what you saw in these subdivisions or in these cities? I mentioned turkey buzzard, or what do you think?
Well, and this is where things get a little weird, right? When it comes to bird sightings, I'll use, and let's put this in quotation marks, right? Because not everything out there is a bird. But let's use birds, right? Paco knows everything. That not everything in the sky is a bird. Or an
airplane.
Or an airplane.
Or a UAP.
Yeah, UAP. I like that. So I have. So here's the thing. I have more stories of people talking about seeing unnaturally large birds, right?
Okay.
Particularly at night. And again, they don't really see them. They use the term bird because they really don't have any other word for it. And so it really does become one of those questions of, well, what is out there? And here's where things can get weird. Giantism exists in animals, right? Like every once in a while, you're going to have a lion that's bigger than usual, just like you'll have a lion that's smaller than usual. You'll have a bird that's like, if the average wingspan's, 6 feet, every once in a while you'll have one where the wingspan's 7 or 8, right? So
it's a minor.
It's one of those things. What?
A minor mutation.
Yeah, minor mutations. So it is, again, this is where things get weird. It's like, unless you get a really solid view on something, even if you get a good look at something, if it is unusual, if it is one of those things where it's like a gene went left instead of going right. It can take something that's perfectly normal and natural, and you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is, and immediately puts it into the I don't know what the heck that is, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's could it be something unknown or something really strange? Yeah, or it could be something that is known. And that's sort of the vagary of this entire endeavor that we're on.
Yeah,
is like Paco said earlier, I don't know what it is, but I maybe know what it's not. But sometimes even not, saying, well, I know what it isn't always 100% easy to do, because we can't know every single bird that's out there.
How vast is your knowledge, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't always put everything in that box. And here's where, particularly with birds, sometimes birds like, oh yeah, they belong in South America and they show up in North America. Or it's, some of these, particularly the larger birds, will have such large migratory patterns that they can get lost. They get and they blow in from, they're supposed to be down here, but they get caught in a jet stream and they basically end up in on another continent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon for something like that to occur. Some eagles have natural migratory patterns of thousands upon thousands of miles.
That's how I got
here.
So,
yeah, no, exactly. And so that's where it's like, I mean, unless we have, particularly if you only have this short little window of opportunity to see some of these things, you're like, what was it exactly? Well, a lot of cryptid encounters are just that fast.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that's where we stand.
And I think, like you had made mention that you didn't have your camera on. Mm-hmm. We have been in the presence of questionable, I know what it's not or what it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And the two things that I always love, especially when people start discussing horror movies, is like, you're stupid, I can't believe you're doing that. Yet we find ourselves in one instance with me and Jason both, the first thing we did is get out of the car and look. And the next thing we did was get back in the car and follow it. And it's, yep. I remember looking at Jason, telling him as I'm driving, I'm like, oh my God, I suddenly get horror flicks. Because why would you do that? Why would you go to this unknown? But instinctively, that's what you want to do, because you want to know what it is, whether it turns out to be good or bad. The other thing is you always seem to be like right there where you're grabbing your phone, you look up and it's gone, or you've messed with your phone or your camera or whatever. You're not going to get those blurry shots come.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the case 100% of the time, but there's a lot to be said about the human reaction to events that either it wasn't what they saw, or they couldn't capture what they saw. They can only loosely explain what their event was.
And I got to tell you that I'm so glad, Paco, you brought that up, because this weekend I had to go to a family function. We did a celebration of life, okay? And the person that had the gathering, they lived in the woods. Their house was in the woods on a lake. Very beautiful. It's scenic and beautiful ride through. And my brother was driving and I was in the front seat. And I did it. And of course I did have my camera, my phone on me, because, I was going to take some pictures at the gathering. And for something as simple, you guys, and I'm glad this happened, because this is kind of food for thought. We saw 8 to 9 deer kind of right around, just walking up and down parts of the road. Some were off on the freeway. And here I am grabbing my phone. And I'm not nervous because they're deer, because I've seen a million deer in my lifetime. But still, I have that. I'm anxious to get this cool picture. And for life of me, you guys, every picture I took, which were many, not one came out where you could make heads or tails if that was a deer or not. And I was just simply taking my time, going about trying to get a nice shot. And the picture still was a blurry deer squatch or whatever it was.
Well, I think that's just common. I think our adrenaline gets the best of us in those situations.
It does.
And there are times where it's not the case, right? I think especially when you start talking potentially about UAPs, look at the hearing, right? Not talking necessarily about what Gersh was saying, because
Yeah.
a lot of that was second or third hand hearsay from his standpoint. But when you look at the pilots, where again, the stories are short, they're concise, and they say what it's not, they don't say what it is. Those are the stories that are important to me, because that's the true human reaction to anything that we're trying to understand or we don't understand. And so, in those instances, when people, because I know that's the number one argument, it's my number one argument against Jason whenever I want to argue with him, is then with all this camera equipment we got, why can't we get good, just photographic evidence? And the truth of the matter is, it's us, right?
Yeah.
We're the ones that messed that up.
Well, and going back to your point about the deer squatch, you know, it's. That is one of those things where you can't get you're in a situation where you're trying to get a good picture of a deer. Again, this is not something that's really trying to be elusive. There's plenty of them around, and you have difficulty with that. But then let's take that one step further. You've got adrenaline because you've got fear. You're like, what is going on? Your brain is confused. You're trying to, most people, when they first encounter these things, they're trying to figure something out. Their worldview has broken. And so they're trying to put it all together. That's going to slow your reaction time. Again, even more than adrenaline, because your brain's like, okay, what's going on here? How do we process this? What's going on? I heard someone say to Paco's point earlier about, let's get in a car and follow it. I heard someone say it's unreasonable for the characters in a horror film to know they're in a horror film. Right? That's why when you see someone act, you're like, you're in a horror film. Why are you doing it? It's like they're characters in the movie. They don't know that they're in a horror film. We don't always know that, we don't know what movie we're in. Are we in a rom-com and this is some sort of funny thing? Are we in a horror film? Is this a documentary? We don't know what kind of lives we're actually living or any moment where we are. So yeah, I mean, don't expect people to behave the way you want them to behave in these situations because it's optimal for you. We need to have that empathy for those people to say, hey, they're in an unknown situation. They're, particularly with these cryptids, they're confused. Sometimes they're even panicking because some of these encounters are terrifying. And we need to understand that. And let's face it, if you were walking down the street and you saw a famous, actor and you had like a few seconds to get a picture of him, you wouldn't get that picture either.
No, this would be a blob person.
Or if it was Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah. Oh, don't even talk about Lou Ferrigno, man. That's the thing.
I think when you see some of these responses that I'm reading through, which by the way, some of them are very funny. Thanks, Poncho. But it's when we talk about, well, it's bad digital cameras or whatever. No, I don't. Sometimes yes, like there is an argument to be made for just having crappy equipment. 100% true. But even the best equipment, again, I don't care who's holding it. Like if you're in a situation where you're elevated on your adrenaline, it's hard. It's hard to control. It's the same thing when they talk about when a police officer is involved in a shooting. It's maintaining that control compared to everybody else around you. Which is why when we talk about something like the Las Vegas incident back in what was that, March or April, you see these cops where they're like, we don't want to be a part of this, because like they know how they react with normalcy, but when you take them into an abnormal situation, which the rest of us are in just an absolute weird situation, how do you think we're going to handle it if even the cops are like, we don't want a part of it? Very much.
That's a great point, because with us, we're the minority. For us, an everyday thing is taking in a good cryptid story or watching something about Bigfoot or Dogman or pterosaur or what have you. That's what we kind of are into, and we like doing that. And if you try to get a picture of something that you think you see, if it don't come out, it don't come out. But I got to tell you, make up a great point, because 2 years ago, you talk about the body cams that police officers wear. Well, this body camera video evidence was to be used in convicting a murderer on the streets of Detroit. And I looked over this story many times, and they keep showing the police officer with his video body camera on. And this whole thing goes down, everybody. The shooting goes down. A man drops to the ground, appears out, perhaps dead. I don't know. People are flailing and running, but the cop is running. So the video is bouncing. And, they use that was allowed in the court. But you know what? It probably hurt the case because you couldn't make out what happened in the video. So the case was dismissed. And this guy who probably was guilty walked on that because of that poor video evidence presented. Not that it was poor, it was quite clear, but it was all over the place. Like he needed a stabilization bar or whatever that they used. And so that was, and now it's going back to court because of, they always find a technicality, Jason, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So
they always do.
Well, as I've heard a good lawyer say, there is no such thing as a solid contract. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. I want to go back to something you said earlier about your story about the bird, right? It's like, what is this bird? I don't know, right? In how many people would have seen that bird and said, "Oh, it's a weird bird," and not even thought twice about it? Right. One of the stories you always get the sort of excuse of, well, maybe they didn't see a Bigfoot. Maybe they just saw a bear and thought it was a Bigfoot. Right. Okay. Reverse that. How often is Bigfoot seen and assumed to be a bear? Because we assume that most people encounter these creatures as if, it's like, "Hi, I'm Bigfoot. How are you doing today?" And then just walks off. Right. Most of these creatures, if they're encountered, may actually be doing something else. Their back is. How many stories do you have where the creature's back was turned, and they're like, "Oh, it's a bear," and then they get up and turn around? For how many people does the creature not get up and turn around, or walk on two legs somewhere? How often are people seeing these pterosaurs? Because I thought it was a blue heron. Everyone I've interviewed here in this area that has seen them have said literally the same thing. I thought it was a heron. I thought it was a pelican holding something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I got a better look at it. It was always, I assumed it was something else, usually heron, pelican, something that flies, that's larger and has that weird sort of S-curve thing with its neck, because that's what they sort of look like. How many people have seen that thing and just because they were busy driving or doing something else, they didn't take that second look? How often are these creatures just seen but not recognized as something odd? And how many people recognize them as odd and just like, whatever?
And how often are they drunk?
Yeah.
I mean,
and just write it off.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, it goes both ways, right? How many times do we see something that we assume is normal because that's how we process it, because that's what we want to process, right?
Yep.
But then how many times do we process it as it's this because this is what we're interested in and it's just something normal, right? It's both sides. It's really hard to pinpoint, where you fall on that line sometimes, and sometimes it's you want it to be this. Like there's plenty of stuff where I talk to Jason about where I want it to be what this is because I believe that, but I know I have to play my own devil's advocate on it because the chance of it actually being that is probably really, really low. And he's had plenty of moments where I will argue against the point to where I will almost change his mind on it before he realizes I'm just messing with him. I agree with him, but at the same time, it does give you pause. Did I see what I saw? Or did I think I saw something normal? And really, that's not what I saw. And I'm just playing it down because I don't want to be freaked out by whatever that is.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned about being drunk and capturing a picture or not talking about something. In the book, right. In the book that I wrote, some of these videos that I've done, people always like to start these emails with, "Rob, I wasn't high on drugs. I wasn't drinking. Here's my story." Because now already I know I'm getting a doozy, which is fine. That's what I'm here for. But how many times but it got me thinking, and Paco, when you brought that up, it gets me to thinking though, and this is not intended to be funny whatsoever. How many people out in the woods, how many guys go camping and drink, beer, and that's all they do? Hang out, they camp, they drink beer. And when they, hey, I'm right there with everybody. That's what I like to do. Go maybe try to catch some fish if there's a stream flowing through the campsite.
What
fishing?
Whatever I can
Yes,
catch in my
fishing.
cooler.
Yeah, whatever I catch in my
Mm-hmm.
cooler. Oh, by the way, I brought ham from the house. I'll eat that. But
yeah,
it's right next to this 12
how many times people have seen things, but they think that because they're a little inebriated, that well, I can't be this because I'm drunk. I must be saying things. When in fact, you guys, I bet you more people have encounters that way than sober.
Oh, 100%. I have a story about my uncles. And I'll say Central Texas because I know they don't like talking about this. But the story goes that there was something in the sky following my aunts. At the same time, on the other side of the city, my uncles are, just pounding them back, and they see something, they clam up, and it's not until I have aunts that get there to be clearly terrified at what they think they saw in the sky, and they're relaying the story, and they all just look at each other and like, what's wrong? Why are you guys not like laughing at us? Because that's a normal expectation, right?
Yeah.
But it's been because they've been pounding them back, and they're like, well, we believe you because we saw something too. We just didn't think you guys would believe us because we didn't even really believe us because we're just we're drinking right now. And so but definitely it gets tied up in those emotions on one, will they believe me? More importantly, do I believe myself on what I just witnessed, and who's around me that could be a credible witness? And oh no, I'm caught with a bunch of other people that no one's going to believe what we say because they're going to think we're either joking or we're seeing something because we're inebriated or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of it that plays into it, where sometimes the simplest answer is the true one.
I went ahead and started this from Old Spirit because I think it's a great comment, and he says that I used to be a drinker, never hallucinated from it though. See, here's the thing. Most people don't hallucinate from alcohol.
Yeah.
I said most. I know. Well, that was an interesting night. But my point is, our point isn't, can we trust? No. It's what is the story people tell themselves to avoid the reality of what they encountered? I mean, that's just what it is.
Yep.
On average, people they don't want to think outside the box. I spent 20 years I knew Ken Gerhardt for years before I told him my story. I knew about the pterosaur sightings in South Texas, and I still didn't believe me because that's South Texas. I'm in North Texas, and it's a very long drive. And I lived outside of Dallas. Like, I'm sorry, I could not believe the idea that some creature like that could exist in one of the largest conurbations in America. I just couldn't believe it until I was forced into realizing, oh, hey, by Ken and Lyle, that these things are seen in southern Oklahoma. It's like, oh, hold on, they're seen in southern Oklahoma, and I'm listening to to one of the eyewitnesses tell his story. He made a little statuette of it to sort of show what he saw. And I'm like, that's exactly what I saw. And he the detail of the S-curved neck, I'm like, I can't deny that. So I went out, and I found other eyewitnesses, and it's something that happens a lot. But the average person will tell themselves, I didn't see it, or I couldn't have seen what I saw. And I know that because I did. So the average person
do sometimes.
You're bringing back such great thoughts, Jason. I know you got another 1 or 2 minutes because you got to do something really quickly. This is something I did not want to see, literally. And for those of you that are squeamish, you might want to put your fingers in your ears or whatever. But I was driving to work one day, driving down a road, and there was a car wreck ahead. And there's a lot of gawkers. You know how people gawk at car wrecks. And as I'm driving, I look by, and I thought what I saw was an arm of a person. And in my head, I'm immediately like, well, no, that's not a person's arm. And I even looked again because I had enough time because it's so slow of traffic. Yep. And I keep going. I said, oh, good. And I had in my mind, I tricked my mind. So in my subconscious, I know it's probably a person, but I did not want it to be a person. So I forgot about it. I got home, came home from the news. and it was on the news, and yeah, it was a person that was trapped underneath their car and they lost their life, and that's just how our minds play tricks on us, right? With things that we perceive or don't perceive, or perceive yet filter it, because we all have a very good job of filtering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to leave you with that, Jason. You got to go. Where can people find you really quick? I know the new and improved Jason McLean's back on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, new and improved Jason McLean Questions Everything is back on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. We're live. And then we take the best of that episode and throw it on Saturday mornings as a clip, for ease of sharing. And every once in a while, when I feel that I have something to say, I'll do a quick thoughts at like 10:30 on usually Mondays or Thursdays, but you never know how it goes sometimes. I'm going to go hop over onto the Untold Radio Network to do Mysterious Library with Dr. Dean. We're going to talk about the documentary Third Eye Spies. Really interesting. Obviously, finish this episode and then go watch the replay.
Watch the replay. Absolutely. Because everybody, the replays are always available on all of our channels.
Exactly.
Paco, I want you to stick around because I want to talk to you a little bit longer if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Tell him the church story with the dog.
Well, I'm going to write that down. I don't forget. Church story. Is he pulling my leg here?
No, he's not. It's not.
We're not going to get into that right now because typically we're on the radio as well, and I got to take the 5-minute break in about 4 minutes. So we'll get into that a little later. So you mentioned something, Paco, earlier about the those hearings with the what's the guy's name? Gresh? Is that his name?
Gersh, I think. Yeah.
Gersh. Yeah. Okay. Of course, we can't unpack some of that in 4 minutes. But your first impression, do you believe this guy or not? And for those of you that don't know, this is the guy that. Well, go ahead. You can tell the story really briefly.
Yeah. So the problem with Gersh, I think, is he's been involved in a lot of stuff that's not true, and his support group have been people who aren't always on the up and up. What I gathered mostly from the hearings were the reports of the pilots, and I thought those reports said a lot, and not once did they say anything about extraterrestrials or really UFOs. They simply stated this was technology far beyond what we're capable of. And I remember when going back, and I can't remember the congressman who asked, but he specifically asked, he was like, can we defeat them if we have a conflict or if there's a war or anything? And all three of them said no, but specifically when we're talking about the pilots, they both said, oh, absolutely not. They're like, it's moving in areas that bend physics that doesn't make sense. Like there's no way we could defend ourselves. Those comments stuck in my mind more than anything that Gersh was really pushing, because the problem I have with a lot of people who, when they get on stage, so to speak, is they talk about what they can't talk about. And that was Gersh throughout the entire hearing process. He discussed what he couldn't discuss. And he just would keep saying things. They'd ask, well, what can we hear about here? Well, I can talk about that behind closed doors. Can we have this? Yes, but it's after this hearing. What are you having the hearing for then? Why are you present if you can't discuss anything other than stuff behind closed doors?
Yeah.
It really does bring an air of really just distrust. You know,
it was just probably just like that very first hearing we had earlier in the year, right? With what I got out of it, and I didn't see all of it. It was things that we as a general public, and even if you have a limited interest in UFOs or aliens, it's a lot of things a lot of people kind of already know by chance or just by being an American and watching the news, which I know many people that watch just don't watch the news. I'm one of them, but
I'm one of them.
Well, we do, but we find our media through other sources that we find to be maybe a little more to suit our needs, I guess. Not a narrative, so to speak.
Well, it's not one that you would want to necessarily press, and I think
right.
I will say it's interesting to see something of this caliber on the news when just 10 years ago it wouldn't be heard of. So if nothing else, it brought attention.
Yeah, it sure did. And with that, I think we'll put a pin in it because I can take the 5-minute break and we'll be back. A little learn. You got a couple of stories. Maybe we can get into this a little bit deeper because I'm always fascinated by these stories, and you seem to know. You seem to be in the know on some of these things. So with that being said, thanks for Jason for stopping by. Thanks for everybody coming on in. Don't go anywhere. I got to take the 5-minute break. I'll be back with Paco. We're talking about a whole bunch of weird stuff in 5 minutes.
Four minutes to go, folks. 4 minutes. Three minutes. We're almost there. Two-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. One minute. 1 minute.
Hello, everybody. Welcome on back to the show Beyond BMR. I had Jason McLean earlier. He gave me his 45 minutes. He had to go do his other show that he does half hour from now. So he had to prepare for that. Go check him out a little bit later. But I've got Jason brought along his friend. I didn't even give him a proper introduction. We'll get to that in a minute when I bring up Paco. Mondays is Texas Front Porch, 9 o'clock in the East. Tuesdays, Van Buren Variety, 8 in the East. Beyond BMR, 9 o'clock in the East. Wednesdays, Jason McLean questions everything. He now comes on. He's back doing his live show, 8 o'clock in the East on Wednesdays. Diva Dimension, 10 o'clock in the East on Texas Front Porch. Thursdays, brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock in the East. If you need the Blondes and Booze are with us Thursday nights at 9 in the East with Brandy and Krista. And you can see them again on Fridays, the Blondes, the Booze, and the Woo, as they come on at 9 in the East. Saturday, Tex, Infamous Minds with Daniel Diva, True Crime. Check out Tex, 3 o'clock in the East. And, of course, my buddy Jessica Jones is on Space Out Radio Saturday and Sunday, 10 in the East. Go check out the Cryptid Huntress. Don't forget to subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. And don't forget, if not already, my book, Bigfoot Michigan Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1. It's been out for a month. Thanks to everybody who's bought it already. Those of you that have not, check it out. It's pretty cool. Don't forget the Super Thanks is open. It's a great way to support what we do around here. That is appreciative by myself. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to bring up the other part of my team tonight that joined me. Yes, Eric, Paranormal Highway bought the book. Thank you so much for that. We did a show on that the other day. Thanks for that, Eric. So, yeah, so Paco, you're a friend of Jason's. And, when Jason came out earlier, we got right into Jason to give him his allotted time before he had to take off. But I didn't really, we didn't really say who you were or what you're all about. So, Paco, if you want kind of reintroduce yourself a little bit, even to me, about maybe a little bit of your background. We just finished up with a little UFO talk, and we'll probably get into some of that and the church story with the dog. But before that, Paco, what's up, my man?
So, not much. Me, Jason, and a third buddy of ours, we actually do a show called Vagabond Nerds, where it's more pop culture driven.
Okay.
And all things comic book, if you will, as well. Which is really how I kind of met Jason. Was we ended up attending one of the same art schools, and I say art school as if it was a big one. It was just a local art school, and met him one time, and 26 plus years later, we still talk to each other. School's no longer in business, and we always kind of laugh at that. But as far as delving into this world that we're currently in, Jason's more involved with it. It's my family background when we really first started talking to each other is that of knowing that there is stuff out there, because there has been a lot of paranormal, from little green men stories to UFO stories to I actually have two professional exorcists in my family family tree there. So yeah, we always joke about that. Just like, can you just get me your phone number? Like, dude, I'm not going to go to that. That's where I draw the line, because I know that a lot of that is very real. And
that is. That's what I tell you what. There's one of the things I'm scared of. The devil. I believe in. I always tell people I'm more of a spiritual person, Paco. I do believe in God. I went to Catholic church from 1st grade to 7th grade. In fact, Monday through Friday before class in the Catholic school, I had to go to church every day. So I haven't been to church now probably about 20 years, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in God. But because I believe in God, I do believe in the devil, and I do believe in possession. I believe in demonic activity. I don't know how much you want to get into that. And I know it's kind of cringe for a lot of people listening. It might be, they're mostly cryptid and UFO people. but it's kind of cringeworthy material because, see, for me, it's scary. It's scary for me because I know it. I know that it's something that can take over a person.
It's amazing to me how much crosses over into the cryptid um, society, if you will, where a lot of it, and I think Jason would say it as well, that you have interesting side effects maybe, or definitely some parts of a story for cryptids that when you really look at it from a 1,000-foot view as opposed to being right there, you start seeing other pieces of the paranormal that really play more into it,
Mm,
that could be present and what we would otherwise think these creatures are not. That being something of paranormal demon background, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think demonology is probably where you want to go, but
right.
I'm with you. Like, that's kind of, I love horror flicks, but I draw the line at um, anything that starts really involving demons. Like, I pull back from those type of horror flicks because of all the stories that I've heard,
Yeah.
from from my parents directly, on some of
Right.
these, where they were witnessed firsthand,
Yeah.
to these events, and such as the church, and the dog story that we'll get into. But again, I always cringe on that part because of exactly what you just said, where it's very real. It does. I'm with you. It freaks me out a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I
No, I can tell you already. I was going to ask you if you wanted to elaborate a little more, but we don't have to do that if you're not comfortable with it. But I do have to tell you this. When I was a kid, I always watched horror movies, and I still watch horror movies, but not so much anymore because what I know today about the real, quote unquote, the real world with monsters and cryptids and all these weird things, I now believe a lot of this stuff does exist, much like exorcisms. And up until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I literally had to stop watching anything that had to do with like the original The Exorcist, and then the there's several other ones, you guys out there, Emily Rose,
any of the
the
Conjuring series.
yeah, those
Haven't
things,
watched a
you
single one.
guys, those I've tried to, and I used to, but now what I know today, I can't because I do end up getting nightmares because I know that this is a reality and it's not Hollywood horror. Yeah, can I watch Halloween? One of my favorite movies is Halloween,
Yep.
coming up in October. Great movie, but that's yeah, are there serial killers and mass murders out there? Yeah. But are they Michael Myers? Well, in some cases perhaps, but that's fake. That's Hollywood. But when it comes to these exorcist movies, I just can't do it because I don't want to conjure up anything myself. I was even told long ago, if you're watching some weird B movie and they start chanting these incantations on the television, and if you're listening to it,
Mhm.
people have told me to shut it off because you actually could be inviting that into your home, even though it's going through transmitted through the television.
It's so we so we grew up Catholic, and probably around my 5th, 7th birthday, we switched to Christianity. And what I always say is I have a problem with religion, but my belief in God and Christianity at its base is not a belief that I argue with, right? So,
Mm.
and what I mean by that is I absolutely believe in God, but I do have problem with people who try to mend their religious ways around it so that it becomes more of a practice for them, which can sometimes be no different than someone who says, "Well, I believe in voodoo," because you're just repeating some of the same stuff.
Yeah.
When we start talking about experiences in the paranormal, I've so in Texas, Tyler, Texas, Longview, Texas, there's always been a long history of witchcraft and satanic occult happening in that area.
Mm.
I had an aunt who used to live in Longview, and along with my uncle, and they we're on our way. It's not a time during where cell phones, you can just pick up the cell phone and say, hey, I'm an hour out. It was, hey, we're leaving here. We'll be here at this time. When we pulled up, my aunt's in a panic, and she's, talking to my mom. I'm not young enough to not know that something's going on. I'm not old enough to fully grasp it. But the gist of it is you guys called us just an hour ago saying you were in a wreck. Well, how are you here? Are you okay? And everything else. And it's that, as I'm saying the story, I'm still getting chills myself. But it's absolutely that belief that something had called them to freak them out, to get them worried, to get them panicked, and they believed that we were harmed, that we weren't coming because we had called them, said to come out. I don't believe my uncle was there. I think he had already went to go on the highway to look for us, to make sure, like how we were doing. But she's swearing up and down, like, we talked to you guys for like 5 minutes, like what's going on? And we're having to explain to them we haven't stopped, and that's the same aunt who eventually became an actual practicing exorcist down in South Texas. And I think it's very difficult to kind of deal with those situations when you're not in the know, or you're not prepared for it, or if you're not practiced for it. And so when you look at those type of stories, and I think another one that we had is that she you're gonna have to forgive me because it's been a while. We don't like talking about certain stories,
Sure.
but that's another one where she had become pregnant for about 6 months, and she had a belly, but she had started speaking in other languages that were not conducive of either Spanish or English, and no one knew. And they had people pray for her, and immediately there was no belly. 6 months of a pregnant belly was just gone. Really? So it's and I think that's kind of what started getting her into okay, let me start seeing what I can help other people with because of any demonic presence that they may have. And so we have stories like that run through my family. Jason's heard about 95% of them, and I only say 95 because I think that's what I've heard, right?
Yeah, right.
But it does run the gambit. Some of them, when I'm listening to, I'm like, it's not that, it was this. You really need to kind of like refocus. Other stuff I can't explain. So let's get to the dog in the church.
Yeah.
I had apparently a great uncle who had passed, and the rumor was amongst the family is that he had sold his soul to the devil. And so they get to, because back in the day, right, sometimes you had that funeral, even the coffin procession, done at the house for the viewing. So what they said was happened. Everyone's at the house. He's set up in the living room. They say a big black dog, probably about 4 feet, standing on all, not standing up, but on all fours, walks into the house. The moment that this big black dog, which eventually, as we hear the story, had red glowing eyes, walks into the house, lights are off in the house. They just go, all the lights are done.
So the dog walked in or on all fours, or
no, just walked in on all four like a normal dog.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Very mean, very scary looking.
Okay.
Wouldn't let anyone touch it. Walks right up to the casket after the lights are off.
Oh, wow.
Sits right down by the casket and stays there. They had to surround the house with the vehicles, turn on the lights so that they could actually have light in the house. And then they go ahead and they were like, well, we're going to continue with the funeral. As soon as the preacher's done, the dog gets up, walks out, all the power comes back on. And so the family has always theorized that was the soul going with the dog. Some of it I am just not sure about, right? Like I personally, I'm like, kind of weird. Others, my grandparents lived out in the country, about 30 minutes from College Station in Texas, and College Station's, of course, where A&M's at. But 2 generations of children had different stories. One from the 70s where they would always swear that little men with big black eyes that were green would, run around the house from time to time, and you could see them through the window. Fast forward 15, 20 years with another set of kids, and they had the same thing happened to them, where it was like, well, wait a minute. The older generation, they're like, what did you guys just say? And they're like, well, we saw these little green men with big black eyes running around the house. This happens to be near the place where, I have aunts who said that they were chased by what they couldn't explain in the sky. So these kind of stories run actually pretty prevalent in my family history. And some people talk about it, other people laugh about it, and other ones that we just let it go. Right. But those are the types that of things that we hear. And there's a couple of more. I personally that my parents have experienced some stuff where they don't like talking about. My father will never talk about it because he's not going to. He's just not going to talk about it.
And really briefly, with that being said, though, these are the stories that you really got to pay attention to that really did happen. Because I find it all the time when somebody refuses to tell a story and you try to get it out of them, and you can tell by their expression, the way they carry their body. Those are the ones that I want to hear because I know that there's something going on with that story, right?
Yep. 100%.
And it might not be something they want to remember, and it hurts them, or they're put in a bad place if they have to elaborate on it.
I'll tell you the most recent thing that happened, and I the way I've told it, and I think Jason's explained it on here, or I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he's told this a couple of times. But we did see something in the sky. Jason, has a little bit more presence on wanting to talk about it. Me, like I told him, I was just like, dude, I can tell you what it's not. I'm not going to say it's a true UAP in the fact that I don't know what that aerial object was. That's all I say. That's how I am. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, look, I didn't know what that was. The problem with that story that I don't even think he's told about it is the follow-up is 3 months later, my daughter and her best friend from college were coming home, saw the exact same thing just up the street. And she calls me panicking like, hey, I don't, you told me this story, like she's in the house a little bit like kind of frazzled and just like, we just saw it. And I'm like, are you sure? She was like, it was huge, and so those are the things that, we've seen or we've dealt with. And again, I don't get as involved as like say Jason or yourself would in some of the telling of it. In fact, this is probably the most I've actually said.
Okay.
On a podcast. Like I said, our other podcast is nowhere near this. We're reviewing movies like Blue Beetle. But this is, we have experienced those things, and my family, especially some of the family members that are aunts or uncles or cousins, have certainly experienced things that are just unknown for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I'm glad that you're on. I'm glad that Jason brought you along for helping me out, because since he had to bust out of here, I think it's kind of refreshing in a way, because most of the people that I talk to, they're 100% believers or they've seen something. So I got to ask you, and you can tell me point blank what you think, whether it's you believe or don't believe. Do you believe that there's things out there outside of us? Do you think that there's cryptids? Are you a believer in the alien or any of these subjects, or do you have to be one of these guys that sees it with your own eyes?
Yeah, it's tricky. What I would say is this, especially let's start with UFOs, aliens in general. As enormous as this universe is,
right?
I just cannot fathom there not being life outside. And Jason's biggest thing with UAPs or UFOs is he will absolutely talk about why would they do that? Why would they experiment or anything else like that? And my thing has always been like, well, why do we do that? Why do we watch a colony of ants in an ant farm? Why do we go into an unknown area of the earth, and the first thing we do is we want to dissect, we want to look. It's all observation, learning, and trying to get a feel for what this thing is. Can it hurt us? Can we hurt it? Can whatever. I'm like, why does that not exist on the outside? And of course, Jason's biggest thing is, well, if we're talking about that, then it's more likely the possibility of the paranormal bleeding into that, whether or not Satan wants, what's the old adage? Satan's greatest trick he ever pulled on the world was making him, the world believe he didn't exist. And I get all that. I just, like I tell him, I'm like, how do you not know that there was an alien race, much like C.S. Lewis once talked about when they asked him his theory on aliens, where he was like, hey, look, how do we know God, after us was like, oh, they fell. Okay, let's start over here. They got it right. And now they're just out exploring because they didn't have a setback, right? If that's the case. So for me, I would like to believe that there is something out there that's not necessarily satanic impressions on what it could be, just messing with our heads, but I wouldn't put it past it either. Like, I mean, what if you're a full believer of the Bible, what greater way for the devil to pull believers from Christ than through letting everyone believe that they're their own Christ, their own God. So that's where I stand on that. But
and with the alien thing too, you mentioned Jason. He wrote that book. I have that book too. Here, I got most of his books. The thing that Jason says, I'm not 100% on board with Jason about that. All aliens are demons, right?
Again, I 100% agree with you, and I give him grief for that too.
But then again, we all have our ideas, our theories, and I'm not going to tell anybody they're wrong, because none of us are right or wrong, right?
Except for flat earthers, but hey,
they'll get another one.
But even then, I'm not going to pick on them. Hey, if that's what you want to believe, knock yourself out.
The last time I dropped a bunch of water on a globe, it fell off. I don't know. I poured some water on the globe. Hey, it didn't go, it rolled off. But so with that, we'll turn over. Yeah, so I got you. And another thing too, what's your thoughts on this? To me, when people say UFO, well, I'm old school. When I first saw something, first it was a flying saucer, because I saw my first UFO when I was about 5 or 6, and I called it a flying saucer. In fact, my mom pulled me and my brother into the kitchen and said, you guys, tell me what this is. And we're little kids, though. We were first grade, got us out of bed early. I said, Ma, it's a flying saucer. Because I remember watching the Lost in Space. And we've all watched Lost in Space, and it looked just like that craft, right? So I called it a flying saucer. And so as I've gone on through life, to me, UFO is alien. UAP to me is our stuff. They try to say unidentified aerial phenomena is the terminology, right? Well, that's probably what we have built. Where UFO to me is what's come from the galaxy. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Having the experience I have, I think I like the terminology of UAP. But man, do I want to believe the UFO version. Like, I want to believe that extraterrestrial thing. It's just, so let's talk about that fact that there's a technology growth stunt, or stunted growth back probably since like the 1930s, 1940s. We were progressing along really fast with the industrial age. We got further in the 50s and 60s, and then all of a sudden, as we're doubling our technology and how we're using vehicles or machinery or anything else like that, we kind of take a pause. I mean, you can go and look back in history and see that we suddenly weren't having the amount of rate as it had been previous of that expediency. And then we're not talking about computers. Computers double every 6 months, right? Yep. AI, whatever that's having, that's doubling. So with that retardation of technology during that period, was that hidden from us to create what we now see as what you're saying, UAPs, that we've have advancement, and someone else just said, no, let's stop real quick and let's do this slowly, because I don't think people are prepared for it. So when we say that stuff defies logic or defies physics at our current understanding, who's that person, or who are those people in the background that are helping to create that they're like, no, we're there, we're just not letting you know we're there, And what you're seeing are, to your point, um, these government-controlled craft that are out there because we've already unlocked the technology. We just don't know it as a as a race.
Yeah, I can go with that. I can go with that. What you're saying there, I agree with a lot of that. And the next question, of course, is a little more, and this is the one I don't know. I think I know what your opinion is. We talk a lot about the dog man, the phenomenon of Bigfoot. Number one, I'd even ask you, have you ever had a cryptid encounter? And if not, fine. But if not, do you think that Bigfoot exists? Do you think there's something out there? Now, you say that we're naive to think there's another race out there. I don't know. There's got to be life on other galaxies. I'm a firm believer. Am I going to call him an alien? Am I going to call him am I going to call him a gray? I don't know. Never seen one, but I've seen a Bigfoot. I've seen a cryptid. What's your thoughts on that phenomena? Something you think is out there, or just a million people are making it up?
I think there is a what's the best way I can put it? I think there's a legacy of creatures that maybe we just don't understand that still exists today. Right? How much do we know about stuff we haven't found? Right? Like what's the quote that we use? You don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth behind that. It's Bigfoot, but maybe one day we catch him and we realize, oh, you've been this part of humanity all this time. We just never, y'all wanted to stay hidden, and we're just not finding you. Look at the tribes in Africa where to this day, they don't allow outsiders, and we would be those aliens or those other creatures that they don't know about possessing technology that they have. We still find tribes like that today. So why couldn't we find Dogman or Bigfoot or anything else like that? Now, I give Jason a lot of grief because there are times where, he'll say, "Oh, well, we've got proof," or they're about to prove something that scientists have been working on, and I'll always his big thing right now is the fecal matter they found where it's like it says that it's Bigfoot. I'm like, no, it's proof that there's something that's not human. There is a difference. It doesn't mean that it's Bigfoot because unless you have Bigfoot already captured and you know what that DNA is, you're pulling DNA for the fact of we just know what it's not. That doesn't make it proof. It just makes it not us or not anything that we currently know. But do I want to believe that there's creatures out there? Absolutely. Do I tend to feel more it has a lot more to do with the paranormal than it does actual cryptids? That's probably more the way I lean.
Again, I can agree with a lot of what you say here tonight. It's always good to have a fresh person on. I mean, you're not in the field, and in fact, what your expertise is. Why don't you tell? We only got a couple minutes left. There might be some people out here that might be interested in. Do you have a channel? I mean, you're in the comics and such. I know Donnie Cho might be. Oh, you know Donnie. You met him today on the right back to the airport.
Not only did I get to meet Donnie, I was actually on Jason Questions Everything with him, and we had an argument because Jason, after the UAP hearings, Jason was giving this great big soliloquy about why that he doesn't like it. And I'm like, dude, why can't cryptids just be friends with other UFO people, and why this big hate for it? Like, I can throw your stuff out there too and just be like, well, I prove to me that Bigfoot exists, and let me show you why it doesn't. And it's not that, and he knows this. It's not that I don't believe that there's something out there. I just
I got you.
don't say proof when it's proof or science for one thing, but then you don't want to use the proof or science for the other. Like, you sound hypocritical, and it really is just a big thing of like, why can't we just all come to that understanding of it's not impossible? Maybe it's improbable for sure, but that doesn't make what you're talking about an impossibility. It just means that there's not been a solidarity of proof that's been presented to us as a people to sit there and say that these things do or do not exist. So I know sometimes it sounds like I'm trying to play both sides, and that's certainly not what I want. Like I said, I want to believe in aliens. I want to believe in Bigfoot too, but I am very much a show me guy.
Well, I got to tell you what, because I think most of Americans are you. on this show, me personally, I've seen a lot of different things. People that are in chat listening later have seen a lot of things that perhaps you have not. And I get that because let me tell you something. If I hadn't had, well, it's hard for me to say about me because I had a lot of weird things happen, mostly with the paranormal growing up as a kid. But I will tell you this, though. I saw the Patterson Gimlin film as a kid, and I saw Leonard Nimoy within search of, and I saw the Bigfoot. Now, as a kid, I don't know, I was probably early teens, and I was always interested in monsters. I was always interested, my dad brought me up with the old black and white movies, Vampire, with Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr., The Wolfman. Those are my wheelhouses. When I really want to kick back and enjoy a movie, that's what I watch, right? So, yeah. Did I believe in monsters? No. But I always read books, magazines, and then as the development of the internet uh, came about, there's more information. But I'll tell you, until I had my Bigfoot encounter, even after seeing the Gimlin film and that, I'm like you. I'm like, wow, I think something exists. But my word was think, or I hoped something existed.
Yeah.
Did I really believe it did? Because I was like, man, we haven't seen one of these yet, just like the other average Joe out there that just use that they're a Bigfooter just by circumstance, right? They're like, oh, they're Bigfoot. Yeah, there's some, more people when they hear Bigfoot, they think about the beef jerky commercial, to be frank. We are a minority. When it comes to cryptids in general, people that are watching this show and people are in chat, we are the minority.
Yeah.
Well, I think more people think like you do. So I thought it was a great show. I liked hearing your perspective and your earlier commentary. What is there any place that you can market? I mean, do you have a channel about what you do, or are you anywhere that people can find you?
Yeah, again, we do YouTube and Facebook. Vagabond Nerds. We haven't done one recently. Like Jason said, he had taken off a couple of months. I had actually taken off some time. We used to do them about twice a month up until this year, where life just kind of took over. A little bit hard this year, but we look to get back on track in September. So if you come across YouTube or Facebook and plug in Vagabond Nerds, you'll see Jason again. We always joke with him. He's got like 20 million podcasts and a total combined listener base of about 1,000.
Okay.
But we're always out there. That's a completely different take on anything that we've talked about here.
Yeah, I do know it's different because
Yeah.
I do know it's different, but it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever your interests are, I'm sure there's some people in chat that might be interested. So I thought, but then again, you've had some great stories regarding, the exorcisms and just the things that you've kind of experienced. I thank you for sharing that because I know that it's been a while since you really talked about it, and I could tell especially with the things, the really dark stuff.
Jason's probably been the only one to really. There's two people that have probably heard the majority of it. Jason's one of them. The other person I'm not going to mention right now, just because I don't know if they want me to mention.
Yeah.
I'll pick on that person later for sure and be like, hey, this is what we've been talking about. But yeah, for sure, I love Donnie sitting there saying, you'll be seeing more of me on Donnie Cho Says Stuff. Good guy, Donnie. I enjoyed seeing you today.
Yeah, Donnie's got a great show. I've been on it. Me and Donnie did a show. We talked about 80s and 90s rock bands a couple months ago.
Oh, yeah. That was a conversation too about the fact that I didn't grow up listening to certain music, but hardcore gangster rap in the 90s and grunge was my wheelhouse. And then as I got a little older, it became 80s, 70s, 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Especially some of the early stuff. And for whoever asked that question, behind me for the figures, got some Blue Beetles, got some Supergirl, got the Dark Knight stuff over there. And in the middle of that, surprisingly enough, is Nolan Ryan from when he got hit in the mouth and continued pitching from Bo Jackson. That's still my greatest pitcher I've ever got to meet him a couple times. Good guy.
So. Oh yeah, great, incredible pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Maggie. Maggie, thanks for the super chat. For those of you that pull out my book already, Bigfoot Mission Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters Book 1. It's on Amazon. You can find it on my YouTube page. It's very easy. The link. Thanks for everyone for stopping on in. Thank you, Paco, for filling in after Jason took off to take care of his other show. It was a really fun show. It was a pleasure to meet you here today. And with that being said, Thursday I'll be back at 1 p.m. Christel will be back from the Dogman. We're talking about a man who has seen several UFOs or UAPs in the sky that he has documented, has video on, and we're going to discuss his findings this Thursday, 1 o'clock on Brunch with Bigfoot, Mr. Rob. For Paco, for Jason McLean, and for myself, thanks once again to Maggie. We're out. See you next time.